Hey everybody! Today we're going to talk about the basics of geometry. We're going to be looking at a few definitions that we'll need going forward. And so let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is a point. So a point is just a location in space. And you've seen points before, but it has no size. And it also has no shape. It's what we call an undefined term in geometry because of the fact that it has no size or shape. But in order to study it, we do need something to look at. So if you look to the left, you can see the little dot, and that's going to represent a point for us. To name a point, we always use a capital letter. Always use a capital letter. So again, if we look to the left, we see that point there, and it has a capital A. So to name this, we would call it point A. There is no symbol. You would just write out the word point and then capital A. The second thing we're going to look at today is the line. Okay. A line is just made up of points. Okay, so if you can imagine, it's a bunch of points very, very close to each other, and it forms a line. Now, in order to get a line, you need at least 2 points. Okay. 2 points form a line. A line is also what we call an undefined term in geometry, because it has no thickness, and it also has no width. Okay. But again, in order for us to study it, we need to be able to have a visual representation, and so to the left you see a picture of the line. Notice the 2 arrows on the end. That shows you that it's a line because a line actually extends indefinitely. So in other words, it never stops. And that's what the 2 arrows on the end represent. To name a line, there are 2 ways you can name a line. You can name a line by any 2 points that are on the line, or by a lowercase script letter. And script here just means cursive. So if we wanted to name this line that's pictured to the left, we could call it line XY. We could use these 2 points that we see on the line. And if we're going to use those 2 points, we have a symbol we can use. And it's just a smaller version of a line. And we'd say line XY. If we wanted to use the lowercase script letter, then we would actually have to use the word line, not the symbol, and we would call it line N. And I just put a little swirlies on it to make it look more cursive. So we could call that line XY or line NX. What we could not call it is you could not put your capital letter with your cursive letter. That is not a way to name a line. It's either 2 points, which would be your capital letters, on the line, or the smaller cursive letter, either at the end, either end of your line. This is not the name. You could not name it line XN. So again, to name a line, you have to use 2 points on the line, or the smaller cursive letter at one of the ends. Now, with this, there are 2 vocab words you want to make sure that you're good with, because you will see them pop up from time to time. The first word is collinear. Collinear points are points that lie on the same line. Points that lie on the same line. So, if we looked, we could say X, Y, and I'm going to add a point right here. We'll call it point C. We could say X, Y, and Z are collinear points because they're all on the same line. Okay, X, Y, and Z would be collinear. X, Y, Z are collinear points. The second vocab word that you want to make sure that you're familiar with here are non-collinear points. Non-collinear points are points that do not lie on the same line. So again, I'm going to add a point here, and you're looking at the points as a group. So let me do green. Let's stick a point out here, kind of floating above the line. Let's call that point T. So if I were to look at points X, Z, Y, and T as a group, I would say they are non-collinear. What makes them non-collinear is point T. Even though 3 of them are on the same line, if there's one that's not, then we would say they're non-collinear. So we would say X, Y, Z, and T are non-collinear points because they're not all on the same line. The third thing we're going to be looking at is the plane. Okay, and not the kind you fly in, but in this case, if you look at the picture, it looks, some people say, like a leaning rectangle. That's actually called a parallelogram. But a plane is a flat surface. Okay, and it's just made up of a bunch of points. Okay, it's a flat surface. Now, with a plane, you need at least 3 points to make up one. Okay, if you only have 2 points, the only thing you could say about the 2 points is that they could form a line. So if you want a plane, you need at least 3. Like a line, a plane extends indefinitely in all directions. Okay, so you have to look at that picture and imagine it really doesn't stop, it keeps going. Now, of course, we couldn't draw something like that, so we do need a visual representation. So that's how we draw it, so that we can study it and do things with it. To name a plane, because again, we're naming them, you need to use 3 non-collinear points that are actually on your plane. Okay, that's the first way, because a plane has 2 ways, just like a line. So 3, there's that vocab word, non-collinear, 3 non-collinear points on the plane, or the other way you can do it is an uppercase script letter. And again, script just means cursive. So for example, if we look at the picture to the left, okay, we see points K, J, and L. And how do I know they're points? 2 things. They all have dots, and they're capital letters. So we could call this plane, and with a plane, there is a symbol. You can make a small version of the plane, okay? Or you can also write out the word plane. Okay. Really not super picky here, okay? But you could say plane and then the 3 letters, J, K, L. Okay, and we're just listing them out, no commas, okay, because we're giving it a name. So think of it as when you write your name, okay, you don't write, if your name is John, you wouldn't write J, comma, O, comma, H, comma, N. So when we're naming this plane, again, we wouldn't put any commas, we would just say JKL. Okay. So that could be plane JKL. Now, the nice thing about this is that's not the only way you could write those 3 letters. Okay, if your classmate wanted to call it plain KLJ, perfect. If someone else said, well, I called it LKJ, that's great too. Order doesn't matter when you're putting the letters, so there is more than one correct way to name this plane. So that's with the 3 non-collinear points. If I wanted to just use the uppercase script letter, if you notice down here in the corner, you see a cursive P. Okay, and it's not the best cursive, but it definitely doesn't look like a regular capital P. So the other way you could name this plane instead of plain JKL is you could say plane P. Okay. And again, cursive, just try to give it some little swirlies. That's not a really good P, kind of looks like a weird 8. Let me try that again. So give it a little swirl, there we go. Okay, so I can kind of tell that I'm trying to make it cursive. So we could call that plain P. And usually the cursive letter will be in one of the 4 corners. Notice it does not have a dot. Okay. That's how you tell whether or not it's a point. Has no dot and or it's written as a cursive or script letter. Now again, just like the line, what you couldn't do is you couldn't mix a point with the cursive letter. So you couldn't come here and tell me that this is plain J, K, cursive P. Okay. That would not be the correct name for that plane. Okay. If you just want an easy way to remember, you cannot mix capital letters with the cursive letters. Okay. They don't go together. So when you go to name it, make sure you don't have capital letters with a script/cursive letter. 2 definitions that come along with a plane. First one is coplanar. Okay, and very similar to collinear, coplanar points are points that lie on the same plane. Okay, so again, if we look at that picture, we could say points J, K, and L are coplanar. Now, I did put commas here because I'm not naming the plane, I'm just naming the 3 separate points. We're just naming each point individually, and so we say J, comma, K, comma, L. The second vocab word that goes with your plane is non-coplanar. Okay? And remember, non, when you put it in front of a word, just negates it. It means not. So if you have non-coplanar points, they're points that do not lie on the same plane. So again, let's go back to the picture. Let me add a point so you can see it. So let's put point H. Okay, it's kind of floating over here underneath our plane. If we looked up those 4 points, H, L, J, and K, we would say as a group they're non-coplanar because H is down by itself. It is not actually on the plane. When they say on the plane, okay, if you're looking at a picture, that would mean in that box, inside that box. Okay, and clearly H is not inside the box. So we'd say K, J, L, and H are non-coplanar. Last 2 little things are just geometry facts that you will see happening a lot. Okay. In the first picture, we have 2 lines. We have line R. We also have line S. And they are intersecting. And intersecting just means meets. Some people like to say it means touch. And then some people like to say cross. However you want to look at it. But intersecting means they just meet at some point. And if you notice in this picture, line R and line S intersect at this point. Okay. Line R and line S intersect at point P. So 2 lines intersect at a point. It will always be a point. The last picture we have is we have 2 different planes. We have plane L, which would be this one. And we also have plane M, which would be this one that looks like it's laying horizontally. And it almost looks like plane L is going through M. You kind of have to visualize that in your head. And then when you notice, again, intersects means meets, touches, crosses. But what you should notice with this picture is where they intersect, they actually form a line. they form line K. So two planes, when they intersect at a line. Now, keep these notes out because in just a second, on the second video, we're going to walk through some examples together, and you will probably want these notes just as a reference.